For years, Mostafa Baluch was known as a young, affluent businessman with a taste for luxury and success. A prominent figure in Sydney's Northern Beaches community, he owned a popular restaurant, drove expensive cars, and lived in a multi-million-dollar waterfront mansion. To those who knew him superficially, he embodied the image of the self-made man enjoying the rewards of hard work and ambition. But beneath the polished exterior lay a secret life. Police allege that Mostafa was not just a restaurateur, but a major player in one of Australia's largest drug importation conspiracies, an international cocaine operation with links stretching across South America, North America, and Europe. In this video, we'll look at the massive police operation that exposed his secret empire and the 16-day manhunt that gripped the nation. Born in 1988, Mostafa Baluch grew up in Sydney's Northern Beaches, the son of Afghan migrants who had built a comfortable life for their family after fleeing conflict abroad. His parents ran several successful restaurants and were well regarded in the local community for their hard work and hospitality. By his 20s, he was following in his parents' footsteps. He became the owner of Turvo Restaurant, a high-end dining establishment in Northbridge. The restaurant was well received and added to his reputation as a sharp young businessman. To customers and acquaintances, he was the image of success. A confident, sociable man who enjoyed fine cars, good food, and the prestige of entrepreneurship. But even as his business flourished, Mostafa's early encounters with the law hinted at a rebellious streak. In 2015, he faced charges of resisting arrest and destroying or damaging property, offences that ended with a good behaviour bond. A year later, in 2016, he breached that bond, though the infraction was minor and carried no additional penalty. The incident passed quietly, and Mostafa appeared to return to business as usual. Then, in 2020, he was fined $500 for a traffic offence, driving against the direction of an arrow. It was a small matter, yet it added to a growing pattern of disregard for authority. At the time, few could have imagined that this same man would soon be accused of orchestrating one of the most ambitious cocaine importation plots in Australian history. By early 2020, the New South Wales Police Organised Crime Squad and the New South Wales Crime Commission had launched Strike Force Jillabeenen, a state-based investigation into a suspected large-scale cocaine syndicate operating across Sydney. What began as a routine inquiry into a man gambling unusually large sums of money at the Star Casino quickly grew into one of the most significant drug operations in New South Wales. As investigators followed the money, they uncovered links to suspected international suppliers and a network of couriers and brokers moving millions of dollars in drug proceeds through local businesses. At the same time, the Australian Federal Police were collaborating with the FBI on a global covert operation known as Operation Ironside, the Australian component of an international effort to infiltrate and dismantle organised crime networks through a secret communications platform called Anom. Marketed in criminal circles as an encrypted communications app immune to police surveillance, it was in fact designed and secretly controlled by the FBI. Thousands of devices had been distributed worldwide to criminal figures who believed they were communicating safely, while in reality, every message was being intercepted and decrypted in real time. As the intelligence gathered under Operation Ironside was shared with Australian authorities, detectives within Strikeforce Jillabeenen began connecting the dots. Through encrypted messages, they allegedly identified a user believed to be Mostafa Baluch, who appeared to be coordinating with overseas suppliers and domestic distributors. His communications, combined with GPS data and financial records, painted the picture of a financier and facilitator, someone who provided capital for international shipments and arranged logistics once the drugs reached Australia. The messages allegedly linked Mostafa to discussions about multiple cocaine consignments arriving from Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico, some hidden in shipments of industrial materials and ceramics. Between April and May 2021, 3 separate packages addressed to apartments in Bankstown, Revesby, and Strathfield were intercepted. Each contained cocaine concealed inside boxes of modelling clay. Together, the seizures weighed 27 kilograms. But police say those interceptions represented just a small fraction of the planned importations. One particular consignment, a 900-kilogram shipment of cocaine from Ecuador, was of primary interest to Strikeforce Jilabinen. According to investigators, Mostafa and his contacts had invested heavily in that cargo, expecting a return of tens of millions of dollars. In late May 2021, the AFP and DEA jointly intercepted the shipment offshore and replaced it with a sham delivery of inert material. A controlled delivery followed to a warehouse in Morisset near Lake Macquarie. Surveillance captured members of the syndicate unloading the boxes, apparently unaware that the real drugs were long gone. Soon after, messages from the Anom account attributed to Mostafa allegedly celebrated the successful arrival. One exchange reportedly boasted, "We control the market, we are safe." On the 3rd of June 2021, police executed a search warrant at Mostafa's Bayview home on Sydney's northern beaches. The property, a multi-million-dollar residence overlooking Pittwater, had long been seen as a symbol of his success in the restaurant trade. Inside, investigators found $62,000 in Australian cash, $12,000 in US currency, a small quantity of cocaine, several anabolic steroids, and luxury watches. In the garage sat a white Bentley Continental, purchased only weeks earlier for $244,000. Inside the car, officers discovered a passport application form, which prosecutors later described as evidence of a planned escape. Mostafa was arrested and charged with conspiracy to import a commercial quantity of a border-controlled drug, knowingly dealing with the proceeds of crime, drug possession and supply offences. The charges alleged that he was a principal financier in a syndicate attempting to import more than 900 kilograms of cocaine, part of a wider 3-ton global conspiracy worth an estimated $900 million. Initially refused bail, Mostafa was remanded in custody. Police argued he was a severe flight risk, citing his overseas connections and financial resources. However, on October 21st, 2021, Central Local Court Magistrate Michael Crompton controversially granted him bail despite strong police opposition. The conditions were among the strictest ever imposed: a $4 million surety secured against his parents' Bayview property, daily reporting to Mona Vale Police Station, a ban on alcohol, drugs and encrypted devices, and the wearing of a 24-hour electronic ankle tracker. Mostafa walked free from prison that Friday. Over the following weekend, he attended a series of family gatherings and barbecues that police later believed were quiet farewells. 4 days later, their warnings proved justified. On the night of the 25th of October, after signing in at Mona Vale Police Station as required, Mostafa returned home, and a few hours later, his tracking bracelet was cut near Bayview Golf Club. By 10:45 PM, the discarded device was found on the roadside, and police realised he had vanished. CCTV footage later captured a black Range Rover travelling through the M4 tunnel that night, with investigators alleging Mostafa was hidden in the back seat while 2 associates drove him out of Sydney. A nationwide manhunt was launched. Detectives raided homes, interviewed associates, and tracked financial movements. Rumours circulated that Mostafa might have boarded a private plane out of Bankstown Airport or a vessel bound for Southeast Asia. His family publicly claimed he may have been kidnapped, but New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller rejected the theory as absolute rubbish. For over 2 weeks, he managed to evade capture. Then, on November 9th, 2021, police received intelligence that led them to the New South Wales-Queensland border. Acting on a tip, officers from the Queensland Police and the AFP intercepted a truck at a checkpoint near Tweed Heads. When officers knocked on the side of the container, they heard a knock in return. Inside, they discovered Mostafa, freshly shaven and hiding in the back seat of a grey Mercedes SUV with bundles of cash nearby. He was arrested without resistance and taken to the Southport Watch House. The truck driver, Jovanko Kitanovsky, was also detained and later charged with assisting his escape. Mostafa was extradited to Sydney the next day and transferred to Silverwater Correctional Centre, where he faced additional charges for breach of bail and obstruction of justice. While back in custody, Mostafa's legal troubles deepened. In February 2022, prosecutors filed new charges against him, including obstruction of justice, telecommunications offences, and dealing with the proceeds of crime. Police alleged that during his time on the run, Mostafa had used third parties to manage encrypted communications and had attempted to liquidate or conceal assets linked to drug proceeds. Court documents revealed that investigators had recovered encrypted phones, laptops, and evidence of money transfers connected to overseas accounts. At the time, Mostafa remained in protective custody, subject to strict isolation conditions due to his perceived influence within the prison system. Despite several procedural hearings, his substantive trial date continued to be delayed while courts processed the unprecedented volume of digital evidence seized under Operation Ironside. Mostafa's escape and subsequent recapture exposed a wider network of associates, some of whom were later charged or sentenced for their roles in helping him. In October 2022, the New South Wales District Court sentenced Jovanko Kitanovsky after he pleaded guilty to aiding an offender. Prosecutors argued that he had knowingly assisted a fugitive to flee, while the defence claimed he was unaware of Mostafa's true identity or the seriousness of his offences. After reviewing Anom-related messages and forensic evidence, the court concluded that Kitanovsky was fully aware of the escape plan. He was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 18 months. That same month, investigators uncovered that former rugby league player Omar Sleimankel had been in contact with Mostafa on the night of the escape. Omar, who had previously played for the Warriors and the Bulldogs, was questioned by police, but was not accused of any wrongdoing. Detectives confirmed that while he had spoken with Mostafa around that time, there was no evidence he assisted in the escape or any criminal act. The revelation, however, highlighted the breadth of Mostafa's personal network, which spanned hospitality, sport, and the Sydney nightlife scene. In October 2023, yet another name surfaced in connection with the case: former New South Wales police officer James Perry. Perry was convicted after it emerged that he had accessed confidential police databases to obtain information related to Mostafa. While there was no evidence he directly assisted Mostafa, the court accepted that his actions had undermined public confidence in law enforcement integrity. Perry was sentenced to 20 months in prison, with a non-parole period of 10 months. His conviction highlighted the depth of corruption risks posed by criminal infiltration into law enforcement and the reach of networks like the one surrounding Mostafa. As 2023 progressed, Mostafa remained on remand awaiting trial on the major conspiracy and proceeds of crime charges. By October, his case became entangled in a growing legal challenge mounted by a group of 66 defendants, dubbed the Anom 66, who launched a legal challenge questioning the legality of the evidence collected through the Anom platform under Operation Ironside. Defense lawyers argued that the interception and use of messages obtained from the FBI-run network may have violated Australian surveillance and privacy laws, potentially rendering the evidence inadmissible. Mostafa's name appeared among those challenging the admissibility of Anom material, though his case remained largely under suppression orders due to the scale and complexity of the evidence. Throughout 2024 and into 2025, the matter remained before the New South Wales Supreme Court and the Federal Court, with periodic procedural hearings, but no final ruling on admissibility. Prosecutors continued to prepare a consolidated brief for the Commonwealth DPP, describing Mostafa as a principal financier in an international cartel network connecting Sydney, South America, and the Middle East. By mid-2025, the broader legal landscape around the Anom 66 began to shift. The Australian government introduced emergency legislation aimed at reinforcing the validity of the Anom evidence after multiple defendants challenged it in the High Court. In October 2025, the High Court ruled that law enforcement's use of Anom-derived communications was lawful, dismissing the Baiki-led appeal that sought to suppress the material. The decision effectively secured the admissibility of Anom evidence nationwide, ensuring that ongoing prosecutions, including Mostafa's, could proceed using the intercepted messages as primary proof of conspiracy and coordination. Despite these developments, there have been no public updates regarding Mostafa's specific proceedings. Court suppression orders remain in place, and the sheer complexity of the evidence has delayed the scheduling of a trial date. Legal analysts believe that, even with the High Court's decision resolving the admissibility issue, Mostafa's prosecution may still take several years to finalise due to the volume of digital material, international evidence requests, and linked defendants. As of November 2025, Mostafa remains in custody, awaiting the next stage of his long-running case. The High Court's ruling has cemented the legality of the ANOM operation, but its ultimate impact on his defence strategy and whether he will face trial or seek a negotiated plea remains unknown. 4 years after his dramatic arrest and recapture, Mostafa Baluch's story remains unresolved. What began as an inquiry into suspicious gambling at a Sydney casino grew into one of Australia's largest and most complex drug trafficking investigations. As Mostafa sits behind bars awaiting the resolution of his legal proceedings, his case stands as both a cautionary tale and a landmark in Australian law enforcement history. A reminder that in the interconnected world of organised crime, even those who believe they are untouchable can ultimately be traced, exposed, and brought to justice. This is a complex and ongoing case. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. As always, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video and want more stories from the Australian underworld, please consider subscribing and liking this video. It really helps me out and helps the channel grow. Till next time, take care.